If there were chariots found in the Red Sea, it would probably have something to do with the crossing of the sea.
We know that this incident occurred in the Red Sea. We can be confident that there is probably some evidence left behind there.
And if this is the site of the crossing, we would expect to find physical remains of the Egyptian army on the seabed.
In late 2024, a secret expedition descended into the Red Sea and found something that should have stopped the world. There, on the seafloor, the team reportedly discovered the remains of an entire Egyptian army, frozen in time. Human bones were tangled in the wreckage, and deep beneath the coral lay the unmistakable glint of gold. But when the findings reached the world's top Egyptologists, they reportedly went completely silent. Then the team checked their sonar maps against documentation from 40 years earlier, and large sections of the debris field were gone. Not eroded. Gone. Drag marks scarred the seafloor, suggesting that something heavy had been pulled away. The evidence appears to be vanishing, and someone may not want you to know what's down there. Here's what you need to understand about this expedition. This was not some university-funded research project that would end up buried in an academic journal nobody reads. This was a covert operation privately funded to the tune of over $10 million by backers whose names have never been released. The team assembled for this mission included elite deep-sea divers, many of them former military underwater archaeologists who had grown frustrated with the politics of their field. Engineers operating technology that most research teams can only dream of accessing. We're talking about advanced side-scan sonar capable of mapping the seafloor in extraordinary detail. Military-grade, remotely operated vehicles fitted with high-definition cameras that could capture footage in the crushing darkness hundreds of feet below the surface. Hypersensitive magnetometers designed to detect metal beneath layers of sand and coral. This was not amateur hour. This was a surgical strike on a mystery that has haunted certain researchers for over 40 years. They began their search in the Gulf of Aqaba, that narrow finger of the Red Sea that separates the Sinai Peninsula from Saudi Arabia. For days, the sonar pulsed into the deep, scanning grid after grid of the seafloor. And then the operator saw something that made him call everyone to the screen. Strange, symmetrical anomalies, shapes that were not natural rock formations. They were round, they were precise, and most disturbingly, they were arranged in a long, linear trail stretching across the seafloor. The shapes looked exactly like wheels, hundreds of them. They deployed the ROV, sending that robotic eye down into water so dark and cold that human divers could only stay for minutes at a time. The submarine's lights cut through the gloom. At first, there was nothing but sand and stone. Then, emerging from the sediment like a ghost, they saw it. A perfectly round shape, completely encrusted in coral. It was unmistakably a wheel, an ancient spoked chariot wheel. As the ROV glided forward, another came into view, then another. The debris field stretched for nearly a mile and a half. This was not a single accident. This was a catastrophe. The divers had to go down themselves. What they saw when they reached the bottom has been described by members of the team as overwhelming, even terrifying. They were swimming through a war zone, frozen in time. The seafloor was scattered with the remains of what seemed to be a fleeing or perhaps advancing army. They recorded wheels with 4 spokes, 6 spokes, and 8 spokes. This detail matters greatly because these exact designs correspond perfectly with the different types of chariots used by the Egyptian military during the New Kingdom period. The 4-spoke wheels belong to older models. The 6 and 8-spoke designs were the advanced, high-tech, stable platforms used by elite warriors and royalty. Finding all of them mixed together in one place was like uncovering a snapshot of the entire Egyptian chariot corps wiped out in a single moment. But it wasn't only wheels. They discovered twisted metal fragments that seemed to be axles. They found what appeared to be the rectangular remains of chariot cabs, now reduced to piles of corroded bronze and petrified wood, fused onto the seafloor by centuries of relentless coral growth. And then they found bones tangled within the chariot debris, bone shards, hundreds of them. Some were clearly animals. The skulls, ribs, and leg bones of horses lay exactly where they would have been if the animals were still harnessed to the chariots when they died. But others were unmistakably human. Spinal columns, pelvic bones, fragments of skulls, all mixed together in a chaotic, horrifying jumble that suggested sudden, violent death. One of the divers, sweeping a powerful light across a mound of coral, spotted something that made the entire team freeze. A faint, unnatural glimmer beneath the crust. Something was shining down there. A dull, unmistakable golden sheen. This matched the most extraordinary and most rejected claim ever made about this site. That among the army's wreckage rested a single gold-plated chariot wheel, perhaps belonging to a high-ranking general or even the Pharaoh himself. They couldn't touch it. The coral had sealed it in place like natural concrete, and any attempt to remove it would destroy it. But they documented everything. Thousands of high-resolution photographs, hours of high-definition video. They knew what they had uncovered would either change the world or disappear forever. But here's the thing. The discovery was only the first piece, because the location, the precise geography of this site, is perhaps even more astonishing than what lies on the seafloor. The Gulf of Aqaba is known for being exceptionally deep in most places. We're talking about a huge underwater canyon that plunges down 5,000, even 6,000 feet. That's more than a mile straight down, a sheer wall of dark water. Trying to cross it would be utterly impossible for any army, ancient or modern, except for one place. Right where the divers discovered the debris field, there is a huge flat land bridge that spans the entire Gulf. It's an underwater plateau stretching nearly 10 miles from a large beach on the Egyptian side called Nuweiba to the shores of Saudi Arabia. On either side of this bridge, the seabed drops sharply into those mile-deep abysses. But the bridge itself is relatively shallow, around 900 feet at its deepest point. Compared with the canyons flanking it, this is a raised pathway cutting through impossible terrain. The sonar maps show it clearly. A distinct massive underwater road, 10 miles long and several miles wide. This is the only place in the entire 100-meter length of the Gulf of Aqaba where an ancient group of people could have even attempted a crossing. And here's where it gets extraordinary. The beach at Nuweiba, where this underwater bridge begins, is a huge, sprawling shore, completely surrounded on either side by steep, impossible mountains. The only way in is from the west. The only way out is forward into the sea. This geography is a one-to-one match for an ancient account that describes a group of fleeing people trapped against the water, with mountains closing them in and an army approaching from behind. And this geographical feature, this underwater bridge, is something ancient writers could never have known about. You cannot see it from the surface. You can only discover it with advanced sonar technology that did not exist until the modern era. Yet the story they told points directly to this singular location. The linear distribution of the artifacts follows the path of this submerged bridge exactly. The mile-and-a-half trail of wheels and bones looks like a group that was caught during the crossing. The 900 feet depth protected these artifacts from storms, ship anchors, and lutters for millennia. The unique currents created by the deep canyons on either side trapped silt and sediment across the plateau, slowly covering the wreckage. The warm, clear water was ideal for coral growth, and the coral acted like natural concrete, growing over the hard surfaces of wood and bronze and metal. Over thousands of years, the organic material decayed away, but the coral preserved its shape. The divers weren't simply finding wheels, they were finding wheel-shaped fossils. Without this exact combination of geography and biology, any remains would have scattered and vanished into nothing centuries ago. This land bridge also explains the scale of destruction. An entire army with hundreds of chariots, horses, and soldiers funneled into this narrow 10-mile bottleneck would be completely exposed. When disaster struck, there was no escape. They couldn't go left into the abyss. They couldn't go right into the abyss. They were trapped on a corridor that became a killing ground. But here's where the story gets even stranger. This entire discovery, the secret expedition, the coordinates, the exact location of the debris field, all of it traces back to one man. And for decades, the academic world treated him like a joke. Ron Wyatt wasn't a professor. He wasn't connected to any prestigious institution. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee, a self-taught biblical adventurer who spent his own money pursuing claims that mainstream archaeology had already dismissed as fantasy. He was the definition of an outsider. In the 1970s, Wyatt became obsessed with finding the true location of the Red Sea crossing. He rejected the conventional theories about shallow, marshy lakes in northern Egypt. He followed textual clues that he believed pointed to a massive body of water deep enough to drown an entire army. His search brought him to the Gulf of Aqaba, to that mountain-locked beach at Nuweiba, and to the underwater land bridge. He reasoned that if this was where the crossing happened, then the remains of the destroyed army must still be down there. So in 1978, armed with basic scuba gear, a small boat, and conviction that bordered on obsession, he did something no one else had bothered to do. He went down and looked. What he said he had discovered was exactly what the 2024 expedition claimed to verify using their $10 million in advanced technology. He reported chariot wheels covered in coral. He claimed he had recovered a hub from one of them. He took photographs that looked blurry and grainy and were easy for critics to dismiss. During later dives, he reported human bones and horse bones scattered among chariot parts, and he made his most astonishing claim of all, saying he had found and filmed a golden chariot wheel shining faintly beneath the coral. When Wyatt presented his findings, the academic world didn't simply ignore him, they tore him apart. He was branded a fraud, a pseudoscience promoter, a religious fanatic, seeing whatever he wanted to see. His other claims made him an even easier target. He also claimed he had discovered Noah's Ark. He argued that the real location of Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabia, directly across from Nuweiba. He said he had discovered the Ark of the Covenant inside a cave beneath Jerusalem. To mainstream science, this wasn't serious research. It was a faith-driven treasure hunt carried out by someone with no credentials and too much belief. Ron Wyatt died in 1999. His claims remained widely ridiculed, but he left something behind. His research, his maps, the precise coordinates of everything he had discovered. The 2024 expedition wasn't searching blindly. They were following the map of the man everyone had dismissed as a fool, and their advanced technology allegedly verified, one after another, the unbelievable things the nurse from Tennessee had been claiming all along. The sonar confirmed the land bridge exactly where he said it should be. The cameras confirmed the wheels, the 4-spoke, 6-spoke, and 8-spoke designs, just as he had described them. The divers confirmed the bones. They even reportedly spotted the glint of gold Wyatt had described 40 years earlier. The experts who spent decades rejecting him are now facing high-definition evidence that he was right, and they have nothing to say. But that leaves the biggest question of all. If an army lies at the bottom of the sea, how did it end up there? The ancient account says the waters parted, a path appeared on dry ground, and when the pursuing army followed, the waters closed and drowned them all. Mainstream science says that's impossible. Yet the evidence is still lying on the seafloor. Something happened in that gulf, something devastating. One theory points toward a volcano. Around 3,500 years ago, a massive volcanic eruption struck the Greek island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. It was one of the largest eruptions in human history, a world-changing event. An eruption of this magnitude hundreds of miles away could have generated a massive tsunami that spread across the Mediterranean and connected bodies of water. What many people don't understand about tsunamis is the drawback effect. Before the enormous wave arrives, the sea withdraws. The water gets pulled back dramatically, sometimes for miles, revealing the seafloor. To anyone who had never seen this phenomenon, it would seem as though the sea itself was splitting apart. The theory goes like this. The fleeing group is trapped at Nuweiba. The Thera eruption causes a tidal drawback in the Red Sea. The water retreats, revealing the 10-mile land bridge. They rush across. The pursuing army, watching their quarry escape, charges onto the exposed, muddy sea floor. But the drawback is only the opening act. The second is the returning wave. Just as the army, burdened by heavy chariots, reaches the middle of the gulf, the tsunami strikes. A wall of water crashes back in, destroying everything along its path in an instant. The timing, the parting, the collapse of water walls. It matches the ancient description almost perfectly. Other theories move into stranger territory. Some suggest that what the fleeing group carried with them wasn't simply a religious artifact, but a piece of advanced technology, an energy source or weapon that was taken from Egypt. The pursuit wasn't about recapturing escaped workers. It was about retrieving something of immense power. When they were trapped at the sea, this device was activated, creating the dry passage through some unknown force. Once the army was committed to the crossing, the device was shut down, and the waters collapsed. This explains why the Pharaoh would risk his entire elite fighting force in a reckless charge. He wasn't simply chasing people, he was chasing something irreplaceable. Whatever the mechanism, natural or otherwise, the evidence on the seafloor tells a consistent story. Something happened in that narrow corridor. Something sudden, something violent, something that killed hundreds, perhaps thousands, in a single catastrophic moment, and left their remains to become fossilized in coral for 3.5 millennia. But if the proof is there, resting at the bottom of the Red Sea, documented with high-definition cameras and advanced sonar, why aren't we hearing about it? Why the silence? Now we arrive at the question that haunts this entire story. Why are the experts silent? The world's leading Egyptologists, the academics who have spent their careers studying ancient Egypt, have said almost nothing about these findings. The discovery was quietly shared with certain institutions, and the response was not excitement or curiosity. It was a wall of silence. Here's what you need to understand about the academic position on this matter. For over 100 years, the consensus among secular Egyptologists has been absolute. The mass exodus described in ancient texts did not happen, at least not on the scale the story claims. This is taught in every major university. It's written in every textbook. It's the established dogma of the field. Scholars point out correctly that there is no archaeological evidence in the Sinai Desert for a massive population wandering for decades. Where are the campsites? Where are the mass graves? Where is the pottery? They point out correctly that there is no mention in any Egyptian record, no hieroglyphs, no papyrus of their most valuable military asset being destroyed in a single catastrophic day. The entire framework of modern Egyptology, its timelines, its king lists, its understanding of the power of the new kingdom, is built on a foundation that does not include this event. It cannot include this event. To the academic establishment, the story is a powerful cultural myth, but a myth nonetheless. And now, a team of divers following the map of a man every serious scholar had dismissed as a crank has found a massive underwater debris field that matches the ancient account with disturbing precision. This is not one or two ambiguous artifacts. This is hundreds of chariots, wheels with spoke patterns specific to the Egyptian military of the 18th dynasty. The exact right time period, at the exact right location on the only natural crossing in the entire Gulf. If this site is authentic, then the experts were wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. A professor who has built a 30-year career on the position that this event is a myth cannot suddenly reverse course. Their reputation would be destroyed. Their publications would become fiction. Every student they mentored would have been taught something false. The institutional pressure to remain silent, to dismiss, to attack the source rather than engage with the evidence is overwhelming. But there's a darker possibility that some researchers have whispered about. What if the silence goes beyond academic self-preservation? This discovery, if proven beyond doubt, would provide physical, tangible evidence for one of the foundational events described in the texts sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In a world already fractured by religious and political tension, what would that mean? It would elevate one religious tradition with archaeological proof above all others. It would validate claims that billions of people hold sacred and that billions of others reject. It would be not just academically disruptive, but geopolitically explosive. And here's where the story gets truly disturbing. The evidence is disappearing, not slowly eroding over centuries the way underwater artifacts naturally decay, disappearing in ways that suggest deliberate, methodical removal. Remember the golden chariot wheel that Ron Wyatt claimed to have found back in the late 1970s? According to his account, he located a 4-spoke wheel plated in gold, the kind of ceremonial vehicle that would have belonged only to the highest Egyptian royalty, possibly the Pharaoh himself. He said he brought it to the surface. He documented it. He photographed it. And then, believing he was doing the right thing, he reported its existence to Egyptian authorities, fully expecting they would be thrilled at such an extraordinary discovery. What happened next should trouble anyone who cares about historical truth. The wheel vanished. There are no official photographs in any archive. There is no museum record anywhere in Egypt or beyond. There is no government statement acknowledging that such an artifact was ever recovered, ever examined, ever existed at all. The single most important piece of physical evidence, the one object that could have verified everything Wyatt claimed, simply ceased to exist the moment it left his hands. Skeptics point to this disappearance as proof that Wyatt fabricated the entire story. No wheel, no evidence, no credibility. Case closed. But consider the alternative possibility, the one that's far more unsettling. What if the wheel was real? What if it was confiscated precisely because of what it proved? What if it now sits in some government vault, some private collection, some place where it will never be subjected to scientific analysis or public scrutiny? Artifacts of profound historical significance have disappeared before when they threatened powerful interests. Why would this be any different? But the Golden Wheel is not the only thing that seems to have vanished. The 2024 expedition came equipped with sonar technology far superior to anything available in Wyatt's era. They created detailed maps of the debris field and then did something crucial. They compared their new scans to the original documentation Wyatt left behind from the 1970s and 1980s. What they found was deeply troubling. Large sections of the site that Wyatt had marked as dense with artifacts Areas where he documented concentrations of chariot parts and skeletal remains are now suspiciously empty. The debris that should be there according to his records is simply gone. Natural erosion cannot explain this. The site has remained stable for thousands of years, protected by its depth and the unique current patterns created by the surrounding underwater canyons. What the team reported seeing instead were drag marks on the seafloor. Long linear scars in the sediment that look exactly like what you would expect if heavy objects were hooked by cables and pulled away. This is not the random scattering of ocean currents. This looks surgical. This looks intentional. This looks like a cleanup operation conducted over decades by someone with the resources, the access, and the motivation to erase an inconvenient truth from the bottom of the sea before the world ever gets a chance to see it. The footage is real, the location is precise, and the silence surrounding it is anything but accidental. Because what lies beneath the Red Sea may challenge far more than a single archaeological claim. It may challenge who controls history itself. When evidence disappears and the people best positioned to explain it choose not to speak, the truth doesn't vanish. It waits, buried beneath layers of politics, reputation, and fear. This story is not over. It's only been submerged. And as the trail grows colder and the questions grow sharper, one unsettling thought remains. If something this significant can be hidden in plain sight, what else has been buried with it? And who decides when we're finally allowed to know?